In French psychoanalysis, particularly in the tradition of Jacques Lacan, sleep and awakening are not merely physiological phases of the daily rhythm. They are critical events through which the structure of the subject is revealed. His psychic organization, capacity for symbolization, relationship with the other, the place of the object of desire, and the way of processing reality. The distinction between neurotic and psychotic personality types becomes most apparent in how each experiences narcissistic regression during sleep and at the moment of awakening. Narcissistic regression, general framework. Narcissistic regression is the temporary withdrawal of libido from the external world back to the ego. In classical psychoanalysis, Freud, Abraham, it is considered a natural and necessary part of sleep. During sleep, the object-directed libido weakens, the subject temporarily releases tension, and the psyche rests. This is a normal function. Libido retracts from external objects and concentrates on the self. But this regression is not identical for all psychic structures. In the neurotic, regression with the possibility of return. The neurotic is a subject whose structure is supported by the inscribed signifier of the name of the Father. He has access to repression, which allows internal conflicts to be temporarily excluded from consciousness. During sleep, this repression operates in the form of dreams, symbolic, often metaphorical, with elements of fantasy. The dream becomes a scene where conflicts and desires are processed, albeit distortedly. This allows the subject to restore internal equilibrium. Importantly, upon awakening, the neurotic is able to redirect libido toward object relations. The ego restores its boundaries, access to the other, to language and to time re-emerges. Sleep ends and the return to the symbolic order is successful. Awakening serves a stabilizing function. It was only a dream. In this sense, the neurotic passes through narcissistic regression as a temporary phase that ends with the re-objectification of libido. In the psychotic, regression without return. In the psychotic structure, the situation is radically different. There is no inscribed name of the Father, thus repression does not function as a mechanism. What is repressed in the neurotic returns in the psychotic in the form of raw real. It is this real that fills the psychotic sleep, not as a scene, but as fragmented impressions, voices, bodily phenomena. Often subjects cannot even say what they dreamed, only that something was there. It is not a dream but an onslaught. If the psychosis is not yet triggered, the subject may have strange, empty, or anxious dreams that are difficult to symbolize. But in open psychosis, the boundary between sleep and wakefulness disappears. Dream, fantasy, hallucination, and external reality merge. The subject cannot assess, this was a dream, he simply is in it. Here we see the core of narcissistic regression in psychosis. It does not end. Even after awakening, the libido is not directed toward the external world. It remains locked inside, on the ego, on phantasmatic structures. Scenarios, bodies, voices, thoughts, all happen internally, but are perceived as external. This is a total mixing of registers. Psychoanalysts often emphasize what we all do during sleep, narcissistic regression, occurs in the psychotic during wakefulness. We, so to speak, hallucinate in sleep, but wake up and redirect the libido back to the world. The psychotic opens his eyes and the libido remains inward. He does not return to the other, does not reinvest objects because they do not function as points of libidinal attachment. Awakening as a key structural test. Awakening is the point at which structure is tested. For the neurotic, it marks the return to the symbolic order. It is the junction between the internal world and the social, between fantasy and reality. Even if the dream was terrifying, awakening signifies the end of nightly narcissistic regression. The subject can say, "Now I am back in reality." For the psychotic, this is not the case. In open psychosis, awakening may only intensify anxiety. The world does not seem familiar. The body feels alien. Sounds seem addressed only to him. In latent psychosis, awakening may trigger derealization, a sense of non-existence, a loss of meaning. It is a moment where instead of returning to the ego, the subject faces the fact that the ego has disintegrated or was never assembled. Awakening does not stabilize but dissolves, libido and the fate of the object in psychosis. At the root of psychotic regression lies a radical problem with the object. In the neurotic, the object is repressed, returns in dreams, is symbolized and processed. In the psychotic, the object either does not emerge, is not signified, or breaks through in the form of the real, a voice, obsessive thought, bodily hallucination. The subject lacks a symbolic apparatus to organize experience around a signifier. In such a situation, libido has nowhere to be invested. It either remains centered on the ego, as painful, anxious narcissism, or finds no localization at all. This creates a state in which libido does not circulate. It is frozen, locked. Therefore, sleep does not relieve tension, and awakening does not bring clarity. Everything remains in a chaotic field of half fantasy, half hallucination. Clinical note: from a clinical perspective, the phenomenon of awakening is often a critical diagnostic moment. The analyst pays attention not only to the content of the dream, but also to how the subject awakens. Can he distinguish dream from reality? Does he return to time, to the body, to language? If not, this is grounds to speak of a psychotic organization. We also note whether the phantasm disappears upon awakening, or conversely, whether awakening merely opens the door to it. Conclusion: sleep and awakening are not merely physiological cycles. They are dramatic events that reveal the architecture of the subject. For the neurotic, sleep is a controlled regression with the possibility of return. For the psychotic, it is a state that may persist both day and night, as the structure does not permit escape from narcissistic enclosure. In such cases, awakening is not a return, but an entry into deeper fragmentation. French psychoanalysis pays particular attention to these transitions, between inner and outer, between ego and the other, between desire and the real. And it is precisely on this threshold, between sleep and awakening, that we can observe whether the subject's structure is capable of sustaining symbolic reality or whether it collapses into the abyss where the dream never truly ends, but only changes its face.